Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. Today's subject is going to be something a bit different. I'm not too sure how to really introduce this one, in all honesty, but I'll do my best. It's interesting things within WoW. Now, this can be many different things. This can be lore within WoW. This can be certain characters within WoW, certain NPCs, certain just references. Many different things are hidden within WoW that we sort of walk by every day and don't even realise. And it's quite nice to bring them to light and to show them a bit of appreciation, in all honesty. So there's many things within WoW, and it's quite fun to obviously go over them, find them, and relay what it is to you guys. But there's so many things within it, or within WoW, that are hidden or representing something else, that it's way too much for one podcast. So depending on the reception that this podcast gains, it will sort of mean whether I revisit this subject or not, pretty much. But let's get started with some of the first ones. We'll stick with TBC, since TBC is recently released. We're going to go with Zangarmarsh. And there is an NPC in Zangarmarsh called Count Ungala. Now, this NPC is, if you look at your quest log or your map and you've got Questy active, he'll just be an exclamation mark. He is a NPC that drops a quest, and this quest is called Ungala's Mandibles. He is one of the very few NPCs to have quotation marks in his name as well. There's very, very few, like within WoW's history, to ever have quotation marks in his name. If you were to tame him, you cannot put these quotation marks back in his name. It is primarily when he is just an NPC out in the world. And he's basically got a much larger, I've forgotten the name of it, much larger scale, model. That's it, model. He's got a much larger model than any of the other nether rays within the area of Zangarmarsh. And these basically, when you hand in the quest for his mandibles, the description basically says that he had developed a taste for living flesh, and he started fighting other creatures and becoming hostile and stuff. And you can even find him fighting like bog lords within the area of Zangarmarsh. Now, what this NPC is a reference to is obviously Count Dracula. Count Dracula being a very popular film like early on, and it's basically, he is a count. He is something that feeds off of living like beings, and it is just a small sort of reference to Count Dracula with this NPC. Again, these are it's either something very simple like this, where an NPC can just be referencing a character, or it can be something sort of a lot more in-depth, whereas it's more like a backstory behind it, and you can get an entire quest line behind these sort of characters as well, instead of just you kill it and you loot the mandibles and it tells you like a little bit about that it just wanted, or started developing a taste for living flesh, and having a small reference to it. So that's kind of the first one out of the way. It's nice and easy, nice and simple, but I kind of want to look towards more all of these are very specific NPCs, apart from the last one that I have written down, which is a sort of zone. I want to say it's a zone, it's an instance more like. But we'll move on to the second sort of character within this genre, as it were, as a podcast, and that is Brigitte Bendis. Now, Bendis is a character that's quite interesting, to be honest. She's one of the founding members of the Scarlet Crusade. The Scarlet Crusade are basically the fanaticals of WoW. They take everything to an extreme level. You have paladins, priests and stuff who abide by the light and, don't necessarily want the scourge running rampant. They do everything in their power to, counteract the scourge. Compared to the Scarlet Crusade, they think everyone is the scourge in disguise. They don't discriminate on who, they kill. They either think you're a scourge in disguise, or you aren't devoted enough to protect, the living world from the scourge, so they will attack you anyway. So Brigitte Bendis is one of these founding members, and she was originally there when the Ashbringer was created. Now, this isn't the Ashbringer as in the actual weapon of it, but she was there when the Ashbringer, which is the crystal within the weapon, was created. Now, this crystal has a massive backstory, and that is something that's completely different, but the very short version is, after they defeated Blackhand at Blackrock Mountain, they found this crystal and they took it back. It was a very dark crystal, pulsating with shadow and stuff, and they basically cleansed it with many numerous I've forgotten the word, many numerous light bringers, pretty much, light people who are very strong on the light hand side of WoW, who wield the light as their weapon, and they purified this dark crystal, and this crystal got made and forged into the Ashbringer by Moradin, the dwarf leader, pretty much. So she was there when they purified the crystal for the Ashbringer, and after her father's death, she was promoted to High General, and this is when her father did die during the Hearthglen, the Battle for Hearthglen, and we basically have seen bits and pieces of her throughout WoW's history. In Classic, she is just known as a rare NPC, in all honesty, and I've encountered her a few times and killed her a few times, but she is a rare NPC in Tyr's Hand, which is in the... I get the East and Western Plaguelands confused, but it is in the Eastern Plaguelands, Tyr's Hand. So she's a rare NPC that can spawn in one of 3 buildings, and I have had the privilege of killing her, I guess. I wouldn't say it's a privilege. I've found a rare NPC and got a green item from her, that's kind of the thing. But you meet a lot more of her in Wrath of the Lich King, so this isn't a character that they felt comfortable just killing off as a rare NPC. You meet her within the Wrath or the Death Knight starting zone a lot, but your main objective is basically spying on her and reading her journal and stuff to see what's been happening. And pretty much from her journal, you get the sense that she's a bit crazy. So it's all about how the light, or how she's been, or how she hears whispers to herself constantly her whole life and believing it to be the light. And this might be the case. So recently in WoW's history, going back to about Legion, we always thought the light was good. The light was always good, and, the void or the shadow was always bad. It's, the big bads of WoW, that kind of thing. But since Legion, we've had a bit of a take on it. So the light isn't as good as we all think. And this is very, very much at the forefront of the Scarlet Crusade, because the Scarlet Crusade and their leader, Brigitte Bendis, aren't necessarily good guys. They are people who are very fanatic and will go about their way to kill innocents, as well as the Scourge. So, and the light is one of their weapons. It is one of their most prominent weapons against all of what they kill. So the light necessarily isn't the best thing to, have whispering to you at night, as it were, as she writes down in her journal multiple times. Now, throughout Wrath of the Lich King, obviously, you hear the name here and there of Bendis, and she moves to Northrend and basically renames the Scarlet Crusade to the Scarlet Onslaught. Now, Onslaught is not necessarily the nicest of words, to be honest. It basically it's a word filled with death, almost. That's the best way to describe it. And yeah, she goes a bit crazy, and that is ultimately where she meets her end. Now, they could have done a lot more with the Scarlet Crusade and like Brigitte Bendis, like they did within Classic. They had the Tyrion Fordring quest in the Western Plaguelands, or Eastern and Western Plaguelands. You sort of went back and forth in between. But you had the quest where you had to save Tyrion's son. And there was ultimately a Scarlet Crusade member that killed Tyrion Fordring's son called Issilian. And Issilian is again a high-ranking member of the Scarlet Crusade, but you don't necessarily know these characters until, TBC. And in TBC, we're moving on a bit from just a Bendis, but in TBC, you get the dungeon Old Hillsbrad Foothills. And within this dungeon is obviously Thrall, and Thrall being, a captive, a gladiator for Blackmoor? Yeah, I believe it's Blackmoor. And, you're burning down the internment camps. You're trying to keep the Infinite Dragonflight from disrupting this flow of time and all of that. But if you don't do the dungeon, as it were, and you explore this old version of Southshore, you'll find some interesting things. So you arrive in Old Hillsbrad in the top left of the map. If you can't see it in TBC, but you arrive in the top left if you've got a square map. You've got everything above the middle of this map is technically the dungeon, what you do and where the dungeon leads you. And below that you have Southshore. Everyone knows Southshore, everyone's quested there, everyone's killed their murlocs by the beach, etc. And if you walk into Southshore, you find many different things. And many things relate to the Scarlet Crusade and the people who are paladins and abide by the Scarlet Crusade, and even many different things. So, in Southshore, you can find so many things. So, firstly, I'm going to go through them sort of individually. You can find multiple NPCs. This includes the likes of Nathanos Blightcaller, who is Sylvanas' right-hand man, her second in command, that kind of thing. You can find the classic Nat Pagal, who is the fisherman who you learn expert fishing from, who's in multiple expansions, just a staple point of fishing, to be honest. He is the poster boy for fishing. You have Captain Smithers. So this one isn't necessarily as well known, but Smithers is down in Stranglethorn Vale, and there are quests to find his treasure and stuff like that. So he is part of a quest line, and he's not an actual NPC in-game, like in Classic or in any other expansion, to my knowledge anyway. I might be wrong, but this is the only recollection of actually seeing him in-game, pretty much. You have Stalvin Mistmantle, who is a human in this old version of Hillsbrad, but he is ultimately an undead in Duskwood. You fight him during a quest line, and all about his family being cursed and stuff like that. There's a massive long quest chain to deal with him in Duskwood, so it's quite fun how they reference all of these little people here. But the big ones are sort of, Mograine, Tyrion Fordring, you have a Bendis in there, you have a Issilian, you have Fairbanks, you have so many different NPCs in this little town that it's really worth exploring. And if you hang about in the Inn of Southshore, in this old Hillsbrad dungeon, you get a nice little bit of RP. And this is the RP to cleanse the Ashbringer crystal, to bring it to light, to cleanse the darkness from it. And it is just great fun to watch because it's a little bit of lore that's in-game. You don't have to read it outside on like a comic, or you don't have to read it from like a book. This is lore that you can experience in-game, and it shows you like what's happening and how the Ashbringer came to be, or at least part of how the Ashbringer came to be. But like these characters, if you look at Alexandros Mograine, he is called the Ashbringer. He is the one who wielded it, and he ultimately died by being killed by his son. And he was turned into one of the 4 horsemen of Naxxramas, which in Classic many people did face and kill and claim the corrupted Ashbringer, which is an entirely different story. I'll go over that just after, Old Hillsbrad. But you've got so many different characters. Like I said, Abendus is a high-ranking general of the Scarlet Crusade, as well as Icilian. Tyrion Fordring was exiled after he didn't back down from making a promise to a troll, I believe it was. After, they saved each other's life, he refused to kill him or whatever. So he was exiled. And Fairbanks obviously resides in the Scarlet Monastery as a undead, as a scourge, and this is a hidden boss because he explains to you. And you know what? I'll get back to that. I'll get back to Fairbanks actually, because I'll explain it with the corrupted Ashbringer. But so many different characters. You have walking out of the inn, or even upstairs in the inn, you have Tyrion Fordring's son, which is Talon Fordring. This is the son that you tried to save in Classic for a quest, but ultimately dies to another NPC that is in this instance, which is Icilian, who is literally downstairs from him. So, so many of these characters have interacted with each other, know each other from a very, long history in WoW. It's quite fun to just rock up into Old Hillsbrad and watch the RP and see who is in this, little town at this time. Walking out of the inn, you have more Scarlet Monastery or Scarlet Crusade members. You have the Scarlet Crusade or Scarlet Monastery bosses as kids. So you have Herod the Bully, as he's known in Old Hillsbrad, who is the final boss in the Armory Wing. You have Sally Whitemane, who is the, final boss in the Cathedral. You have the Mograine sons, son, I believe, only one son, because we didn't know about his second son until Wrath of the Lich King came along. So you find one of his sons. I'm not sure if you find Houndmaster or whatever, but there's loads of different references and little clues just walking out of the way, like just out of sight in many different places within WoW, and you just got to explore a little bit. But even like in Southshore, you have the same NPC. So there's a NPC in Southshore where he gives you a quest to go and collect Yeti fur and get some thread and a cloak. And this cloak is to make a really cool looking cloak in his eyes, and it's a really comfy one and stuff. And if you do this quest in Classic, he isn't wearing a back piece. He's wearing no cloak whatsoever. Unlike Old Hillsbrad, if you walk in there, he is wearing this exact same cloak that you give him in, or that he gives you in Classic. And he explains how comfy it is. Like, it's ridiculous, it's made out of Yeti fur, stuff like that. It is absolutely quality, and it's a nice little reference to the quest. Because so many people were a bit weirded out by this quest, because you had to have something crafted for it. It was a bit weird. It was kind of the first quest that you ran into where something had to be crafted for it. And these quests didn't come around, very often in Classic. So, nice little, homage to it there. So, just walking out beyond what you can see, beyond what the camera shows you, you can find so many things within WoW that are hidden. And, I mean, even stuff like this. Like, you've got, in Undercity, you've got a NPC called Harbinger Balthazar. Now, this is an NPC that probably every single Horde player has walked by and not batted an absolute eyelid to. He gives you a couple quests, I believe, to go to certain places. It's like calling quests. So when you get to a certain level, he'll say, oh, you can go level in Hinterlands now, or something like that. But he is in Undercity. He walks around with his little, lamp or whatever. And he is dressed as a butler. Now, Harbinger Balthazar is a clear reference from the butler in Romeo and Juliet, and which is named Balthazar. And this makes sense because all of the 4 bankers within Undercity have the name of, or the surname of, Montague. And obviously Montague being the surname of Romeo, I believe. Yeah, it's not Juliet. I believe it is Romeo. In the, Romeo and Juliet novel, film, etc. So these small things that you don't even bat an eyelid to within WoW are there. They're even in your major cities, such as, Balthazar. He just wanders about the city and no one bats an eyelid to it. It's just great. It's absolutely amazing that they hide so many things in plain sight, but people don't necessarily see them. It's always good fun stumbling across something that, you might know is a reference to something, but you just can't place it. And they've hidden so many of these things out of sight and out of mind. Like Old Hillsbrad is a perfect example. They played with it a lot. They definitely teased the idea of just adding these loads of lore, bits and pieces into the game, but just out of the way for you guys to explore. Even in Ravenhold and stuff like that, that's in Old Hillsbrad, it's completely empty because there's nothing to it really. I mean, it's a little rogue sort of hall, and there's just nothing. It's, all fleshed out and stuff, but absolutely no NPCs there whatsoever because they put a lot of time and effort into Southshore, and people very rarely even know that Ravenhold's there still, up in the mountains of Southshore. But again, these are just many things that you can find within WoW, and it is good fun to explore. The obvious thing to do is just keep your eyes open for these small little things within World of Warcraft. I mean, there's just so many of them, and I didn't really know how much in terms of what I could cover in what sort of time frame, etc. So I will obviously get a lot more together in the next one, but I do want to end on the Corrupted Ashbringer. So the Corrupted Ashbringer is obviously a drop from Mograine in Naxxramas, and it's stuff like this that people found out, and which is really fun that not everyone knows. But you can have an event. If you were to be the lucky recipient of a Corrupted Ashbringer, you can walk into Scarlet Monastery and all of the NPCs will become friendly. They will not attack you. They will bow before you, as it were, and you get to watch a sort of unveiling of a little movie almost. You walk into the cathedral of Scarlet Monastery, and you watch as Mograine pleads his, dad's spirit for forgiveness, and his dad just straight up kills him. And it's all of these little things that you don't necessarily think about, because you might run Scarlet Monastery at level 40 Cathedral, and you've just killed everything, and it's nice, that's the dungeon run complete. Whereas they've added this entire different thing in the exact same zone, in which you've just killed the entire instance, but they've hidden so many things in plain sight. It's just finding what unlocks it, or if it's just out of the way to, find it yourself and explore, that kind of thing. But even, like I said, I'm going back to Fairbanks here. he is a massive lore character in terms of he was with Mograine when he died, when the Ashbringer killed him, because the Ashbringer was taken by Mograine's son, and like he was struck down by his own blade. So this is what Fairbanks describes to you, because you would usually just open the hidden door where Fairbanks is and start killing him as a boss for some extra loot, that kind of thing. But you walk into this with the corrupted Ashbringer, suddenly he turns back into a human. He's not a scourge anymore, he is a human being. And he explains to you what has happened in this situation, why the Ashbringer is like this, what happened to Mograine. And there's so many lore bombs here and so many different hidden things that it's just amazing that people kind of overlook it and don't necessarily appreciate what is in the game. Because we all know what's in the game. A load of killing, loads of quests, loads of content. But what's really in the game, if you look deeper, is loads of meanings, loads of references, loads of lore. An absolute crap ton of lore, by the way, hidden in plain sight. And you just need to keep your eye out to look for it, because it's absolutely everywhere. That's the thing. And that's what I love about WoW. That's what intrigues me about WoW. I'll be playing the game, but I might stumble across something that's lore-based. And I am quite a fanatic about the lore. So I know sort of, what it means within the game. What, intentions this is, or how this has impacted the game as to where it is today in terms of lore standings, that kind of thing. So definitely keep an eye out. And if lore isn't one of your things that you or that you don't really keep it up to date on in WoW, I recommend really watching some YouTube videos like Nobble86 or whatever. I forget, is it 86? I don't know. Nobble is really good in terms of lore videos. He goes over absolutely everything from characters to big expansions, that kind of thing. But just all of these things are great. All of the lore, the hidden characters, hidden lore things, and just what they do in terms of character development throughout expansions are really good. Again, there wasn't much to go over because I thought that I could flesh it out a bit more, but I know sort of how to gauge it now, because this is sort of a trial podcast, I'm not going to lie, with this kind of content. But I really do hope you guys enjoyed it, and I would definitely love to do this more, because there's loads of hidden stuff within WoW that just is eager to be found, and it would be great fun if I can share it all with you. So thank you all very much for listening. As always, please do check out the social medias, YouTube, Twitch, etc. And check out the latest Patreon podcast if you are a Patreon member. But thank you all very much for listening again, and go a valor friend. Goodbye all.